All right, I'm gonna go outside and see if there's anybody else waiting outside.
Okay.
Wondering where we are. Tried to have signs at both ends. Here's the affidavit. Yeah, there's nobody else out there. Are you frozen? Okay. Nobody else out there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, there's nobody else out there, so.
Okay. Do you want me to just start?
Yeah, it's already 5:10.
Yeah. Okay. Well, tonight our topic is how to homeschool. What did we call it? Like, we're going to talk about homeschooling styles and scheduling strategies. I think we called it strategies. Okay. Anyway, so the first thing that I wanted, this whole thing could kind of be rearranged in a different order, but we're just going to kind of go with this order that I have here. But some of the information is helpful in having the prior information in the next one and vice versa. So there's a couple of major styles or methods of homeschooling. There are more than this, but these are the ones that BeckiJo and I would consider to be major. So box curriculum, online academy, unit study, classical, Charlotte Mason, unschooling, and eclectic. And eclectic means you're kind of choosing some from each, or you're using more than one style. So the first one that I wanted to talk about was box curriculums. And these are some companies that offer box curriculums that are pretty major companies. There are some other ones. These are all Christian to more or less. I think Calvert's like a little bit more on the secular side.
Yes.
But a box curriculum means that you just basically tell this company what grade your child is in, and they send you a box of everything that they think that your child should be studying for that school year. And some of them are like more diverse in terms of the style that they use or the different curriculums that they're drawing from in order to pick and choose. Some of them are publishing all their own, like Becca is up here on the right. This is a first grade curriculum. So these are like all of their books and workbooks. Fourth grade is both of these. This is Veritas, who publishes some of their own stuff, and then they pull from other publishers and just sort of like arrange what they think you should use. And then Memoria Press is this one on the top, and they don't publish everything, but most of these things are actually published by them. I will say that even if you order a box curriculum, maybe you should consider not covering every single thing that they send you, because this is an awful lot to cover in a year for a fourth grader, for example, and for a first grader. Yeah, there was something else I wanted to say, but Sunlight is a little bit more like reader based, like you're going to read a lot of books. And Veritas is classical, Memoria Press is classical. Memoria Press is a little more workbook based than Veritas would be.
is meant to be used.
Are you saying something, BeckiJo? I can't hear you.
I said a Becca is meant to be used in a Christian school classroom. So it definitely has more busy work in it.
Okay, right, yeah. Okay, I think all of these could be used in a classroom. Veritas sells to classical Christian schools too, so. And I think actually Memoria Press does that also. So you could put your kid in an online academy or use online classes. I personally use some online classes. We do School A Academy this year for Latin, and I have used another school that's local to me in Lancaster for Latin in the past. I tend to outsource Latin for my kids once they get to a certain level. But OutSchool and Lumen Learn, you can just get on there and find some classes that your kids are interested in or that you want to outsource. Wilson Hill Academy, Calvert School, Liberty University Online Academy, even School A and Veritas, you could take everything from them and it would be like your kid is attending a virtual online school. It can be a little bit pricey. I would say that you should expect to spend like at least $600 per class, per subject. But depending on, where your family's resources need to be, like maybe an older child needs to be online because you want to, have more time to spend with the younger children. And you don't have to take every class online. You don't have to choose one or the other. Like I said, you could just outsource a couple of things that you think your child would be successful doing online. Okay, another style is considered unit study, and this is where you choose a topic. And here I've pulled a couple things up about birds. So pretend that your unit study is on birds, just for an example. And then you're going to find ways to use study of birds to cover all of the subjects. And so I found this online, and this is basically giving you an example of ways that you can read about birds and write about birds and study flight patterns of birds. For geography, you're going to measure the distance and time it takes birds to migrate in order to study math. For science, you're going to, do some kind of nature study. And then a field trip, obviously, there's tons of things you could do with birds. And for art, you could collect feathers to use in an art project. You could make sculptures of birds, anything like that. And then they have like a category, learn through play, dress up as a bird. I'm sorry. But you could choose any topic. You could choose like knights from medieval times. You could choose any kind of, you could choose astronomy or anything like that, anything that you feel that you'd be interested in. And then you kind of use that as your core and build on that. Okay, let's see if it will now. Okay, the other one that I put on there is classical. This is personally how I teach my kids. Classical, there's kind of two schools of thought. The main school of thought from most classical academies and publishers is this trivium method that came from Dorothy Sayers' speech from like the 20s. Anyway, so the idea is that there's 3 stages of learning. And in the grammar stage, the kids are memorizing and learning basic things. And then when they get to like junior high, they're getting more interested in, debating and arguing. And so they're asking questions about things and they're starting to learn to communicate. And then when they get to the rhetoric stage, they're learning how to like fully communicate their ideas. And so the idea is that kids grow through these stages and that their approach to learning will change a little bit with their developmental stage. I think there's some truth to this. However, as a classical homeschooler, I am more on the side of this other book that I put up here, the Latin Centered Curriculum. I think that, we ought to be, if we're going to call ourselves classical, we ought to study classical language. So I kind of pull from both of these schools of thought, but we could argue about this another day. The point is that classical education usually is very traditional. It starts at the beginning. It's heavy on great English grammar and writing, great books, living books, and usually studying Latin and or Greek would be pretty typical of a classical education. Okay, I don't know why it won't. Okay. And then Charlotte Mason, I would consider to be an offshoot of classical education. Charlotte Mason was somebody who lived in the 1800s and was a gifted teacher. And she wrote a lot about her philosophy of education and how children should be handled. And it's worth looking at and getting ideas from, no matter what your bent is in terms of what style of education you want to do. Charlotte Mason has some good ideas, and people who have sort of expanded on Charlotte Mason have good ideas. And so for those, I would refer you to Ambleside Online or simply charlottemason.com. Both of those are pretty good websites if you want to learn about Charlotte Mason curriculum. Unschooling would be, you don't have a formal curriculum. You just want your children to be self-directed learners, and then you try to foster their interests. And so I've put up here two different things that I found online. I'm sorry, they're kind of pixelated, but unschoolers wouldn't learn to read from a phonics program. They would learn to read by getting curious about reading and then asking questions about how words work. And it would be very informal. In terms of math, you would, just try to encourage them to do math and whatever it was that they were interested in. You take them to the grocery store and do math. Most homeschoolers are doing some of these things anyway. Everybody wants their kid to be interested and to find educational opportunities in what their children are already participating in, but unschooling theoretically only does that. A really good website is Homeschooling Outside the Box. This is York County. And this is a good resource if you want to be an unschooled family. Some people think that you shouldn't really try to educate a child until age 8. So an unschooler would be like, would say, well, we would just want to let our kids be free until a certain age or something like that. This is popular in York County, but you also want to consider who your reviewer is, because if you're this informal about homeschooling, your reviewer might not be happy with what you're asking them to sign off. So if you are an unschooler, ask some other homeschoolers who you should get as a reviewer at the end of the year for your homeschool. And then eclectic would be you're picking and choosing from a couple of different things. BeckiJo considers herself to be eclectic. So I want to make sure I put that in. Okay, so in terms of scheduling, I think scheduling is really important. I am not a heavy scheduled person. I don't like, I didn't like routines. I just kind of wanted to do what I felt like doing. And that doesn't really work, especially if you're homeschooling multiple children. I have found that doesn't work super well. So I wanted to talk about some scheduling options, and these PowerPoints are really simple. So you're going to get more explanation than you are visuals. But so I would encourage you to think about your daily schedule. And maybe you want to do every subject every day. That would kind of be a daily schedule, or which subjects do you want to do every day? You can do weekly rotations, like maybe in addition to math and language arts, Monday is art day, Tuesday is music day, Wednesday is science day, et cetera. So you could rotate through the subjects on a weekly basis. And then block scheduling could look a couple of different ways, but if you feel like I have felt in the past, like there are subjects that I want to get to, but I don't, either it's not enough to do it all year, or I just can't sustain doing it all year. So that might be like a research project, or like an art unit that I want to do, or maybe health. I don't want to do it all year, but I need to accomplish it for the school year. And so you could say have a month or two or a certain number of weeks that you're going to focus on one thing as in addition to your core subjects, and then you're done. Like, let's say, September and October, you're going to do art, but then you're done art for the year. So you're going to start science. And this could be a way to kind of uncomplicate your schedule so that you're not concentrating on so many different subjects, and you're not constantly feeling guilty that you're not getting to that thing at the end of the day because you just ran out of time, or things are more complicated than you expected. And then concentrate subjects on rotation. It kind of goes along with block scheduling, but you have the freedom to do this however you want. BeckiJo said that it was really good for her daughter Annie Jo to just do all of one subject on one day. So like maybe you did all the math for the week on Monday, and then you did all of the writing for the week on Tuesday, etc. Because maybe your kid works best to just like go really deep and concentrate on one thing and not have to do just a little bit each day. It needs to fit you and your child. So something that appeals to you may not work for your child or may not work for every one of your children. And so you just have to find that balance, and it takes time. And BeckiJo and I think would both tell you that, like, you know, your first year, you're going to spend a lot of time like trial and error figuring it out, and that's okay. So you need not feel like I've got to have it figured out now and then I have to stick to it. I would tell you there are some things like that, like don't change math programs every 6 weeks because you'll just like make yourself crazy. But in terms of scheduling, like if you're really getting frustrated with whatever you've chosen to do, try to make some small changes and see if moving in a different direction would be beneficial. Okay, so assignment methods and tools. So how do you communicate with your kids about what they should be doing, and how do you keep yourself on track to make sure that they're doing what they should be doing? And so I've put a couple of things up here. So assignment books, like a traditional assignment book, you or your child write down what they're supposed to be doing. Spiral notebooks were all the rage, I want to say like 5 years ago. And everybody said on the internet was saying, get a 10-cent spiral notebook and just every day write down what your kid needs to do for the day. And BeckiJo said that actually worked really well for her family because it's inexpensive and it's, simple and highly changeable depending on, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, and for Annie Jo, I mean, having come out of teaching in public school, I like having my whole week in front of me. And so I would use the planner. But for my ADHD daughter, when she sees her whole week, she's immediately overwhelmed and defeated. So going spiral notebook and just day by day and I couldn't go a day ahead in her spiral notebook or she'd flip out. But that was a really great way for us to do it.
Yeah, and actually on that note, I did not want to use a teacher planner for like years. I was like, I'm not a teacher. I don't have the same needs as a regular teacher. And then like 2 or 3 years ago, I was like, I broke down and I got a teacher planner and used it for my own family. And that really helped me for a while. So something like that might help you to keep on track, because you can have all these ideas, or you could say, oh, my kid really needs to work on their multiplication tables, or, oh, we really need to do this thing next week, or, oh, I've got to prep that thing so that it's ready for tomorrow. And you can put that in a teacher planner or some kind of notebook that you're keeping yourself. A whiteboard, you can just write things on a whiteboard if you happen to have that kind of situation at your house. Post-it notes, you could just, those are movable. BeckiJo explained to me like a good system that some people have used, where if you write each assignment on its individual post-it note, and then you can move it into a different category. If you're working on it, you move it into a working on it category on the wall. And then if it's completed, you can move it over. So if your child gets frustrated with like erasing things off a whiteboard and they want to see that they've accomplished a lot, a post-it note might be a really good system.
And the mom that shared about the post-it note said that then she had a spiral notebook for each of her kids, and she would put, because each child had a different color post-it note, and she would take the post-it notes, put the date at the top, and stick the post-it notes that were completed that day in the spiral notebook, and then she had a record of what they'd done.
Right. Okay, and then I kind of like the idea, especially if you use a lot of workbooks. This woman, blogger named Raising Clover, she's not somebody I want to endorse, but she has kind of a cool idea where she has hanging files for each of the weeks of the school year. So let's say you're doing a 30-week school year. And then she has colored folders for each of her child inside of each week. So like if you had 4 kids, you'd have 4 different color file folders in the week 1 hanging file system. And then she rips up the notebooks, or I'm sorry, the workbooks that her children need to use, and she puts everything they need to do for the week in there. So some of it's written on a piece of paper, like you need to read this or whatever. And then other pages are just literal workbook pages or something they need to read or whatever you can fit in a file folder. And so she plans her whole school year like that, and then the kid can just take out their file folder for the week and they can look in there and they know that when they've gotten through everything in that file folder, they're finished for the week, and they can kind of self-direct how much time they're going to spend per day, etc. So I think if you're going to use a a lot of workbooks, especially like a lot of stuff that's already pre-printed for you, whatever that happens to be, that could really work. And then that's similar to a work boxes idea. Like you could have a box for each day, and then you put the things that child needs in there. BeckiJo and I both use crates of books per kids. Each of my kids have a crate, and that's where they put their books back. That's where their books should be at all times when they're not using them. And then if we need to, go to grandmother's house and do school, or we need to, get ready for laugh or whatever it is, they take their books out of there and put them into a backpack. I make sure that my kids aren't allowed to carry loose books. I have a thing where I'm like, your books aren't protected. They need to be in a backpack. So you might want to consider, even though you're a homeschooler, having a backpack for each of your children so that they can carry their books around when they need to. And then, are you planning daily, weekly, monthly? BeckiJo kind of talked about this, like how far ahead can your kid handle seeing what they're going to have to do? How much planning can you handle doing in a stretch of time? I can't, quite handle having everything laid out for the month, but maybe if it's going to be a crazy month, like we're doing that, I just need it all written down. I typically plan weekly, but like BeckiJo said, your kid might only be able to see what they can do today. Like they might get overwhelmed by a whole week of a spread. And then I color code my kids. I have 4 kids. So I'm like entry level large family, and each of my 4 kids have a color, and that's it. Like if I buy them something, they're going to be red. And, they chose it when they were in preschool, and like, I don't care anymore. They can't switch because I'll get confused. My kids actually have color coded dishes because my husband was like, everybody needs to have their own dishes that they're responsible for. So we're pretty extreme with color coding. Okay. This is what my son's, this is a 3rd grade child. This is what his assignment book looks like. And I got this for $3.99 at Staples. They sell them at Staples for whatever reason. I think this is published by Staples, but I love this. This looks like a teacher planner. So you have the days of the week, and you have the subjects down the side, and then each little box is a subject for the day. And I just really like this. I can look back on the page from the week before, and I can fill it in based on like, oh yeah, I have to include that subject or whatever it is.
That's my son as well.
What'd you say, BeckiJo?
That's exactly how I planned Caleb.
Yeah, it's just, I find it much better to plan for the whole week than if I had a kid that needed me to daily update them. That would be hard for me. So kudos to you, BeckiJo. All right, so schedule everyone, not just you. So one of the things that can be really disruptive to your homeschool is to have a bunch of kids disengaged, or have any child, especially particular children, disengaged. Like if you're having to teach math to, your 10th grader, and your 3rd grader is just completely unhinged, doing whatever he wants, that can be really distracting and frustrating. And there can be lots of messes that you have to clean up afterwards. So if you kind of figure out what your children should be doing throughout the day, or while so-and-so is with me having a lesson, this person is doing this other thing, that can be really helpful to plan throughout the day, especially while you need to concentrate elsewhere. And then if you can have kind of like 2 or 3 things that a kid could be doing at any time. So like a kid could always do Legos, a kid could always read a book, a kid could always maybe paint on their easel or something. And you just have those things that you can pull out of your head and occupy that child for however long, give them a directive to go do this thing that hopefully, maybe some things that they enjoy and would be willing to do pretty easily if you need to be doing something else. I would encourage you to develop a routine that's predictable for everyone. Like I said, I am not a super scheduler type of person, especially starting out homeschooling, but I have found that this is really helpful if the kids know what to expect and at least know what order things are going to be in throughout the day. And this is also kind of playing into a concept for efficiency and productivity, that you're just reducing brain fatigue. If you're like rethinking every single day, like, what are we going to do next? Like, you're just going to exhaust yourself. So if you sort of just make things, it's boring, but if you just sort of make things all happen in the same order every day, and it'll take time to figure out what the best order for your family is, that could be really helpful. And then work. Yeah.
I was going to say, and the reality is developmentally, children thrive on routine.
Right.
That gives them safety and security. That goes all the way back to when I was in college 100 years ago. and learning that that's so important, especially when children are younger. And so not only does it help reduce your brain fatigue, but it gives them a sense of security too.
Right, right. And hopefully, you'll get more cooperation from your kids, because cooperation from your kids is definitely helpful. Um, and then work towards independence in your children. This scared me as a homeschooler, a beginning homeschooler. Well, it's still, is something that I feel like I have to make decisions about, because I would hear people say, oh, I just give my child the assignments for the day and then they go complete it and then they check back in with me. And I really wanted my kids to have more teaching interaction with someone. I didn't want them to kind of have to learn only from a textbook because they were homeschooled. And so there's a couple of things that I prioritize doing with them in person, but you do definitely want them to become more and more independent, especially as you get older. And that way you can front load the kind of like the one-on-one teaching time with your younger kids who need it more, because your older kids are able to do things on their own, and motivate them to get their work done quickly. My hint here is to give them freedom when they're done their work. If they finish, don't find something, help them feel like they've earned their freedom, and, let them do something they enjoy or have unstructured time for a little while within, the boundaries of what's reasonable in your household. And then you have to think about, where do chores and game time fit in. I know my kids complain that like sometimes we're always homeschooling because I'm trying to make everything educational. So like you could think about like, well, when am I going to be the mom and not the teacher? And then when do you do bills and paperwork? Like these are things that if you ignore them, unless your husband will do them all, you've got to fit this into your life somehow. So please think about those things when you're thinking about your homeschool, which is why we tell you to simplify 100% as often as you can. Okay, so strategies to start. So if you're just like trying to get your mind around this and figure out what to do, the first thing I would suggest is that you like plan your perfect day. Not because you're ever going to have a perfect day, but it will sort of help you think about like, well, what are my real priorities? How much time do I really have in a day? How much can we really do in terms of school? Or, how long do things really take? It's almost like a measure. So you'll have like an actual day and measure it against your perfect day. And you'll either figure out that your perfect day is crazy, or that your actual day is like filled with things that you want to get rid of in order to get closer to what your priorities are. And then to accomplish getting more structure in your homeschool, I would say get a toehold by establishing one thing. And I'll let you cheat and do like one like personal habitual thing with your child, and then one academic thing. So my example is like, you're going to make beds every day and you're going to do math every day. And like whatever else happens, you're going to be okay if you've done those two things. And then until it's a habit, until your kids aren't fighting you anymore, until everybody knows what's going on, until, you really feel like that you've accomplished integrating that into, your routine, then add another habit or scheduling item. So right after math, then we're going to read books for a half an hour, whatever it is that you want to attach it to the thing you've already established. And when we were talking about this, I said, okay, make your bed and then brush your teeth. And I was like, oh no, I don't mean that your children shouldn't be brushing their teeth for the whole time that it takes them to learn to make their bed. But, maybe they brush their teeth kind of randomly, but like you teach them, okay, I want them to make their bed and then brush their teeth. And then, eventually, 9 months from now, they will also pick up their dirty clothes off the floor or something like that. And then don't give up, because it's going to take longer than you think, and it's going to be more complicated than you think. And it seems simple, but you're starting a new thing and it just takes time. I mean, it's don't be hard on yourself, and just don't give up, because you can do more than they thought in terms of, getting your kids into an integrated routine as a family of diverse personalities and ages. And then 2 books that have kind of helped me in this area are this book called Large Family Logistics. Like I said, I'm entry-level large family because I only have 4 kids. But I thought that some of the things this lady said was actually really helpful to me, especially as a little bit younger mom. Her idea is kind of like that you have a certain type of task that you're going to accomplish each day. So maybe Monday is the day that you do paperwork. Tuesday is the day that you clean the house. Wednesday is the day that you go to the store, like whatever. So that's one of her basic ideas, but I recommend this book if you can get it at the library. And then managers of their homes. This one is like, this lady's like a real strict old school mom, but she does really walk you through like scheduling everyone in your family and how to do that and how that can be really helpful. Okay, so if you have uncooperative children, we wanted to kind of address that real quick because you're going to have uncooperative children.
And if your first one's not, then your second one will be.
Right.
No
That's right.
question.
If you have a perfect child, your second child would be awful.
Yes.
And vice versa. So you can do like beat the timer, like, so put a timer on and say, see, for 20 minutes and say, see if you can do, your math lesson, like the worksheet of your math lesson, like in less time than this. And then maybe they get a reward or something, like turn it into a game whenever you can. And then, or you could set a timer and say, we're only doing 20 minutes worth of whatever this is. It could be math. We're just going to work on this math worksheet for 20 minutes. Whatever we don't accomplish, we're just going to let it go. And maybe you do it again for 20 minutes the next day, or maybe you just move on to the next worksheet, whatever it is that you have decided is the most important. Giving kids like a time limitation is a legitimate strategy. And then you could also say sports practice, fun activities, outside play don't happen until it's complete. I had a 12-year-old today who has spent 7 hours redoing the same 2 pages of math that he did previously and got a bunch wrong. And like, so we're just, we're at a high level of uncooperation today, which isn't typical for my kids, but like I have days like this, even though I'm an experienced homeschool mom and I'm giving a speech about this. Okay. A homeschool mom, when I had my oldest, was not super cooperative. So I was getting frustrated because, we're spending all these hours and we weren't getting a lot accomplished. And she said, and an older, more experienced mom said, how about he have to wake up early with dad the next day, like at 5:30, whatever time dad wakes up for work. And he has to complete his unfinished schoolwork while dad is getting ready for work. And that worked a little bit for my oldest, because it was like he had to wake up and then he had to deal with his father, and dads can be really helpful in reinforcing like the importance of schoolwork with kids. It's just another person to kind of support emotionally. Take breaks between subjects, say, okay, we're going to read this book together. We're going to work on phonics, and then you're going to go out and play for 15 minutes. And then you're going to come back and maybe we're going to do this other thing. Sometimes when I have kids that are behind on something, I'll say, okay, and maybe they have 5 pages of something that they have to do. Okay, you do this page and then you get to go play for 15 minutes. And we have gone to the park so that they could have really fun play for 15 minutes. I set a timer, and then at the end of 15 minutes, they come back and do another page, and then they can go play for 15 minutes. So if you're in a situation where you have to, sort of get a certain amount done, but your kids aren't motivated, we were trying to finish the math book early for a particular reason when we were doing
You
that.
actually have to finish a math book, but Kandra wanted to finish that math book.
Right. I do a math curriculum that doesn't review. So, all right. And then I personally start with the hardest subjects while they're most focused. So my core subjects are Latin and math. So I try to get my kids to do those first because they're fresher and they're not exhausted, tired or getting fidgety as much. But maybe your kid is better after lunch and you want to save the harder topics until after lunch. So figure out like when your kid is at their prime and then schedule the more important, more focused topics then. Subjects,
that's going to change as they change and grow too. So with teenagers, they're often far better after lunch because their circadian rhythm is different and they tend to be night owls. So, my daughter she's 17, she doesn't have a lot that she's finishing up, but the last couple of years, we didn't start school until 1 PM. And then we just kind of continued it into evening. Since I'm a night owl, that works. If you're not a night owl, that makes it hard. But for me, especially because of her ADHD and she is my less cooperative child, it really makes a huge difference to be able to go with their rhythm. Something else, and I don't think it's up here, But a wise homeschooling mom told me, if you have a subject that's really hard to teach your child, that your child is really uncooperative with it, outsource it if you can. So for my daughter, it was math and writing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Were really hard. And so it doesn't even have to be something like a co-op. My niece has, she butts heads with her daughter. And so she has someone else teaching her daughter math, just a friend, and they barter for doing that. And that could be just a great idea, whether it's dad that does math with them, or whether you have a family member or a friend who can just do a subject that's harder, that you kind of have a harder time with, outsource it. It's a great, that was such good advice. And now my daughter is talking about taking a writing class with me on Tuesdays for fun, because she got writing from another teacher and learned to love it. So it really makes a huge difference sometimes. And
Yeah,
think
and I know a lot of homeschooling families whose the dad teaches the math.
Yeah.
Especially when you get to a higher, higher age groups, and maybe the dad's an engineer or something, he's just better at math. Kids are doing math in the evenings, in terms of lessons with dad, and then maybe they have schoolwork during the day, but dad's the math guy. And that, for me, I don't have a math husband, but that could take a lot off of a homeschooling mom who's doing a lot of other things. Or maybe dad teaches art, or maybe dad teaches science, or maybe dad teaches what other subjects?
music.
Maybe he's,
My
teaching
husband
writing
sings.
because that's his giftedness, or, something like that. Or maybe dad teaches health, or just one of those extraneous subjects that are hard to get to. And it's not a big deal, for him to spend some time with your kids doing either a curriculum or just covering a subject with them. Dads would be great at PE a lot of times. All right, give your child the choice of order, or which, in other words, like which subjects they do first, etc. I would say let your kid choose anything that doesn't matter. So I have trouble with this because I have this perfected idea of their school year in my mind, and they'll sometimes be like, no, I don't want to do any of that. And so I have to really look and say, okay, which things don't really matter that I can let them decide about. Maybe it's what color their notebook is, or which science subject you're covering, anything, which co-op classes they're taking. If it doesn't matter, let your kid choose. Always, always, always. Okay, it's a learning curve to determine what your child can accomplish daily, and expect figuring this out to take time. It can sometimes be very easy to wildly misjudge either that rarely are you deciding this is going to take a really long time and it goes short. Usually you're saying this doesn't seem like very much work, and they feel totally overwhelmed by it. So, have a conversation with your kid and say, okay, well, clearly this is too difficult for you to accomplish this much. And so we're going to cut it in half, or just get to this many. Math is a great way to, or when this happens in math, a great thing to do is to say, we're not going to do all the practice problems. We're only doing the odds or the evens, or just look through and circle the ones that they really need practice on. They've mastered, maybe half of the review problems, they've mastered that concept. So maybe they're only doing 2 of those out of 10, but the ones that they really need help, work on, you're choosing those. So anytime, or maybe they don't answer all of the questions on the worksheet, or maybe you're not covering all of the comprehension questions in the literature guide. You're just choosing the ones that your kids are either really interested in, or that are relating to something you're learning somewhere else, or that you're interested in. Just cut it back and simplify it if you feel like things are overwhelming.
And everything doesn't have to be done in writing. Don't let the correct curriculum guide your day. Pick and choose. One of the things that I learned, especially with a non-writer, is that often just doing it orally, I got a much better answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out that she understood so much more and could make a more personal connection. Whereas if I'm asking her to write it, she's going to write a 5-word sentence and be done. And once I figured that out, that made a huge difference.
Yeah. The ditch on the other side of that road, BeckiJo, is that your kids don't get enough practice writing, and then they don't want to write because they haven't like done enough of it. And I have been guilty of this. Like my kids have gotten, because I'm like, oh, we're doing it orally. I know they totally understand, but they, didn't develop the habit of writing well enough to sort of adapt to it. And so then when they got older and I wanted them to write more, they weren't really quite ready. So there's definitely balances to be found on everything.
Yes.
This is, there's ways to mess up on both sides, but get to know your child. And as you do it, you'll get better at it. And as your older kids, move through different stages and you see what you did well with them and what you did poorly, you're going to be able to have a second chance with your younger children. And then, older kids, like, because they're homeschooled, you just concentrate on their weaknesses when you need to. When you see that they're weak in something, you say, okay, we're going to really focus on this for a couple of days and catch you up and then continue where we were going. Okay, so here are my bonus tips. I came up with these as I was driving here.
I was going to say, I didn't see those last night.
These are new. Okay. So one is wake up before your kids. Like if you feel like you have this under control, or it doesn't matter, your kids want to wake up at 5 a.m. and do their schoolwork while you're still sleeping or something, like you're in a different situation than me. But as a younger homeschool mom, I read this on a blog or something and I was like, oh, so if you feel like things are chaotic and you're not in control of the day, maybe, and you're like treating it like Saturday morning and your kids are jumping on top of you every morning, asking you for breakfast, like I would recommend that you take this advice because you will just feel like you're more in control and your kids will feel like you're more in control. Use your curriculum as a tool. Don't be controlled by it. That's what BeckiJo was saying. Like if your child, I tried to think of an example of like what curriculum do I use that I don't use the whole thing? And I would say first language lessons, which is like grammar curriculum for elementary school students. My kids memorize, there's poetry in there that they want you to memorize. Now you can just use it like follow the bouncing ball, but some days they're memorizing a poem and my kids are memorizing a poem in a different subject. And so like, I don't need them to memorize another poem. I like the poem I chose better or whatever. So we just read the poem and move on. Or if my kid really knows what a noun is, I will, and there's 10 more lessons about nouns, basically reviewing the original information. I will either abbreviate or skip certain days, or I'll say, okay, we're going to do, 3 lessons. And I just ask some of the questions, whatever it is. Don't be controlled by your curriculum. There are also a lot of curriculums out there where they give you more than you can really use. So it's designed for you to pick and choose, but it's not obvious to you that that was their intention. And so you feel like you need to do a craft and you need to do a worksheet and you need to read the story and you need to answer the questions and you need to whatever, but like maybe one day, you do the lesson with them and you ask the questions. The next day you read the lesson and you do the craft, and you pick the best, right? So like if there's a really good craft that week, you just do that craft on that day. You don't do every craft they suggest, for example. So be efficient. And like, if your child can understand it in a short conversation and you don't need 10 lessons of curriculum, then don't do 10 lessons of curriculum.
And don't do so much that it takes the fun out of the learning for them or for you.
Right. I would say time block your homeschool hours and don't try to multitask. So this is a struggle that I have, but because I'm like trying to answer the phone and I'm trying to fill out, this paper that needs to be sent to the insurance company. And I'm trying to, whatever, and I'm trying to fit those in somehow while I'm homeschooling. And I have just learned that this is a bad idea. Just decide from this hour to this hour, maybe it's 9 to 12. You're going to just only homeschool and that's it. You're not going to answer the phone. You're not going to look at the texts. You're not going to try to also fill out a paper. You're not going to, whatever it is that you would normally do. You're not going to check Facebook. You're not going to, whatever it is that you would do other than homeschooling, only homeschool. And then my other suggestion along the same lines is to buy a digital timer and put your phone in a drawer while you're homeschooling, because a lot of things that I do with my kids apparently require timers, or I've got to look something up and like we can't find the dictionary or whatever. So I'm constantly picking up my phone to do something related to school. But then I see the text or I see the whatever, and I just feel like it's distracting to me because the phone so easily engages you. And so I just really recommend that you have certain hours that you just put the phone away and you just do everything analog so that you can really be present with your kids. And then your kids feel like, you know, they have your attention, and it'll also help you notice things like my child is frustrated because there's too many worksheet questions or whatever it is. All right, that's it. Any questions, any comments? That's all I have for this.
I don't have any questions or comments. You did good,
Okay.
Kandra. You looks like Augie's not done yet, so you got it all in.
Yeah. Oh, actually, Augie just came up here, so I can leave.
Did he?
But I just,
Okay.
yeah, we're going to talk about more things in future weeks. So next week is going to be math, the math emergency. So if you haven't chosen a math curriculum, you know, show up next week and we'll go over a bunch of them. We're going to also cover like support systems, and now I can't remember, but we're going to cover a bunch of topics, and they really complement each other. So if you still feel like, oh, I don't really know what's going on, you know, you could watch the video again or watch last week's video or whatever, but like keep, you know, moving forward with us and you'll find out a lot of things.
And even though you only have a 5-year-old, doing the research like this ahead of time makes it so much easier when things come, when you're starting. And I think it makes it far less overwhelming, and it gives you a much better opportunity to be successful.
Yeah, it allows you to build, like it allows you to kind of say, okay, like these things seem important right now. And then you know, building good habits with a 5-year-old can be really beneficial when you have another 5-year-old or you have a 12, you know, that 5-year-old becomes 12. Like, you know, you're putting in like building blocks. If you can do it intentionally and kind of, yeah, just be thoughtful about what you're doing.
And I would say, always remember your mom first. And my daughter, and of course, my kids were in public school until 5th and 9th grade. And sometimes Annie Jo would say, I miss when you're just mom and you're not the teacher. And so I'd have to step back and say, okay, this is a day where we're gonna watch a movie, we're gonna popcorn, we're gonna cuddle, we're gonna do these things and step back a little bit. And that's okay to do too. And
my kid, I pulled my oldest out of 2nd grade public school at the end of 2nd grade, and he hated school at that point. And so anything that we called school or he knew was school, like he was just totally resistant. And it just took a really long time of being patient with that and just, you know, trying to, you know, redirect his feelings about doing school. And so you might encounter that if you're pulling a kid out of school who does not like it, they don't want to do school at home. And that might not have anything to do with what you're intending to do or what curriculums you've chosen, or, you know, they might be having a great, you know, it might be all fun stuff that you're planning to do, but they just have an attitude about school, and that can take, you know, months and maybe years to sort of reform that attitude a little bit.
So Annie Jo, my daughter was in through the middle of 4th grade, and it took us until about 10th grade to find the love for learning again. So it took a long time.
Yeah, I would say Augie was like really curious, always wanted to learn, but he didn't want to do school. And it took me kind of 2 years, probably the end of the 2nd year, where we were not constantly talking about like, I don't want to do school, mom. I don't want, you know, like,
yeah,
it can take a really long time depending on how upset your child has been by school and how much they didn't like it. Yeah. So that's not a positive note to end on.
But the wonderful thing is with homeschooling, you're homeschooling from the beginning, you're far less likely to have that type of experience. And that's wonderful. All right, Kandra, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Becky. I appreciate being here, and I'll see you next week.
All right, see you on Thursday.
Okay, bye.
Bye. It's absolutely freaking me out that I can't